It's a new year and a new way to find out what's going on at the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. I'm Melvin Pryor, and each month I'll bring you updates from the reserves, news of specific projects, and meet some of the people, both staff and volunteers, that keep the trust going, including today someone who has at least 70 years of history with the trust. I'm not talking about Matthew Capper, who's also with me on the podcast. Hi, Matthew.
Morning, Melvin.
Now, the idea of this is we're going to talk about the trust, but you're going to get me out and about, aren't you?
Yes. So, welcome to the trust. It's fantastic. I think, January transfer window has opened and you're our new signing. So it's great to have you on board. And as you say, new podcast for us and a new opportunity to reach a new audience and to delve into topics in a little bit more depth, really, and really get under the skin of the trust. So I'm looking forward to getting out there with you and basically finding out a little bit more about what we do.
The joy of a podcast is people can listen to it all around the world, not just here in Lincolnshire. So, I mean, we're going to be introducing people from all over the place about what's happening here in the county.
Yes, and I think the nice thing is that everything will have a Lincolnshire focus and a Lincolnshire flavour. But a lot of the topics that we'll be talking about in terms of nature conservation and the work that we do, they have, a broad appeal and they can be applied anywhere, really. So if you're sitting in, the north of Scotland or down in Cornwall, there's something for everybody here, hopefully.
Let's first of all talk about the trust itself and its background. Why was the trust started and how did it start?
Yes, and that's really pertinent for this first episode. So we just celebrated our 75th birthday just back in December. And we started from very small beginnings of a guy called Ted Smith, who really was concerned about the loss of nature and the loss of wildlife in the wider countryside, and particularly in the county of Lincolnshire where he lived and the place that he loved. He was in his mid-20s and he decided that he needed to do something about it, helped form a committee. They got together and they decided to sign into being this county-based wildlife trust. And our aim is twofold, really, for me. One is to protect all of those wild places, all of the best landscapes and homes for wildlife and all the species that call home in Lincolnshire. And the second is to inspire people about all that wildlife, to tell them all about it and to hopefully make them care. And if they care, then they'll act on its behalf.
I'm sure there won't be many podcasts that we don't include that name Ted Smith, because he was such a founder and an amazing person that inspired lots of other people to get involved, didn't he?
He was a real visionary, yes. I mean, once he'd set up the trust here, he went on a bit of a mission around the UK and actually helped to set up wildlife trusts elsewhere. There's now 46 wildlife trusts across the UK, and a lot of them will be able to look back into their history and find Ted somewhere down there at the start of it. So, yeah, an amazing guy, a real kind of pioneer and somebody we're really, really proud of.
I was fortunate to meet him, which was lovely, but also later in the podcast today, going to hear from somebody who actually worked with him, which is incredible to hear some of those stories as well. We're going to reflect on things happening at certain times of the year. And just before we started doing this podcast, I spotted a bird in the tree just outside the window. Was it a bullfinch?
Yes, we're really lucky. Our headquarters here at Bannerbalham House in the centre of Horncastle, but we have grounds that we manage for nature, and so we can look out the window and see wildlife every day. We can have a wander around at lunchtime and just get a bit of vitamin nature, as we like to call it. And just in the tree, almost at eye level, was a fantastic male bullfinch. They're really, really stunning, aren't they?
Brilliant and bright. And another bird to look out for at this time of the year, waxwings. I've not seen any yet, but there are plenty about.
Yes, this is a species which maybe once every 5, 6, 7 years you get a winter where they come across from the continent, from Scandinavia, in big numbers, and they call them waxwing years. They are a stunning bird. They will be feeding on berries. So if you've got a berry bush in the garden, Cotoneaster, something like that, keep your eyes peeled, because they'll be roving around the countryside looking for these berries, and there's been lots across Lincolnshire.
And the exciting thing is they tend to be in a flock, so you get a good number, don't you?
Yes. Over Christmas, I was close to Derbyshire. Well, I went into Derbyshire for one day to see a friend, and there were 200, a flock of 200 out
200?
there. Yeah,
wow.
amazing, yeah. And the noise they make, they have this trilling call. And you have 200 waxwings trilling. It's absolutely magical.
Oh, it's amazing. And to actually see them and hear them. Did you get any photographs, by the way? Because you like taking lots of photographs, don't you?
Sadly, no camera with me at the time.
Oh,
I know.
Missed opportunity. We're going to meet somebody special on the programme now who has a history of almost 70 years with the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust, and his connection starts at Gibraltar Point, and that's a key reserve for the Trust, isn't it?
Yes, we go back to that starting point with Ted, and it was only days after the Trust was formed that we signed the paperwork with Lincolnshire County Council to create Gibraltar Point as our first nature reserve, and we've been working with the council ever since to manage it. It's our flagship site, and it's an amazing place, a beautiful bit of coastline, and the views right across the Wash over to North Norfolk. You can go there in the winter. It's such a wild place with the sound of curlews and the brent geese going over and things like that. It is. They say you shouldn't have favourites, but I think, for most of us, Gibraltar Point would have to be our favourite reserve in Lincolnshire. It's amazing.
Well, that's where it all started for Barrie Wilkinson, who I've been chatting with. He's worked for the Trust. He's still a volunteer with the Trust, and I asked how it all began.
I first came down to Gibraltar Point when I was a youngster of 12 on a family picnic. And it was you could drive anywhere then. There was a track, you could take a car down, no gates. So we picnicked near the bird observatory, and I went to see what they were doing. And they were catching birds and ringing them, and I saw whitethroats for the first time. And that just amazed me to see a bird in the hand. I'd always been interested in the natural world, but to see something like that, really close to. And so when we got home, I asked my parents to make inquiries to see if I could come down. They said, well, he's perhaps a bit young, better wait until he's 15. So I left school at 15, and that July I went on my bike, and that was it, the start of my journey.
So going back to the Trust, what did you get involved with to start with?
Well, it was really the bird observatory itself. There was accommodation in an old caravan on the car park where the car park now is, and people used to stay for a week and watch bird migration and record in the log and that sort of thing. And I helped with that, and we used to ring birds and release them, of course, and then do general watching the migration. And remember one thing we did was, across the river there was a place called the barge pool where some old barges were laid up, and swallows used to nest in those. And it was quite an adventure to go there and go to the barges and ring them in the nests. And that's one of the things that happened in the summer.
What was there in terms of a centre? Was there a building there at all?
Well, it was an old army building, which when the Trust started in 1949, a local chap by the name of Frank Bean, he was a builder by trade. He did a huge lot of work on it to sort of get it fit to use. A couple of camp beds in there, you could sleep overnight, sort of thing, prime a stove to cook your meal on, etc. And that's all there was that was the Trust's first occupation, if you like, of a building. And a lot of work was done from there. And it was such an interesting place that so many people in the scientific world wanted to come and see this new reserve. So Professor Lane King from Nottingham University, she was a geographer. She was very interested in the physiological pictures of the site, and she used to come and stay there. There's a little building at the side of it. It used to be for storage, and we called it the Cathedral because of its shape. And she used to sleep in there. She slept in there one January night. She was so cute, and she mapped all the reserve and found out how the sandspits worked, how they evolved, and how Gibraltar Point came into being.
One of the key names that we keep coming back to when we talk about the Wildlife Trust is Ted Smith, and he's somebody that you knew and really was a great inspiration for you, wasn't he?
He was there on that day when I was 12. His wife, Mary, was with him. And yes, that's when I first met him. When I went to the bird observatory, initially I started to meet people who obviously came to stay there. Then I met a few local people, and they were attending something they called the evening classes, Ted Smith's evening classes, which he used to use as an extramural lecturer. And I thought, well, can I go to these? One day they were going somewhere exciting called the Scotland Common, and I went off with them for that day, and it was just amazing to see another reserve away from Gibraltar Point, because it was a brand new reserve then, bought in 1954. And I said, can I attend the class? And because I was so young, he had to have classes, ask his members whether they mind if I joined. Anyway, they took me on board.
What are your memories then of Ted and how he inspired you? What sort of person was he?
He's very quiet. He's very good at judging people. And he must have thought that, well, probably I was worth encouraging. So that was nice. But yeah, he was very even-mannered and very helpful person.
And of course, his wife Mary, you mentioned, was a great support to Ted through his whole time with the Trust.
Absolutely, yes, that's right. Yes, I believe they met on Bird Observatory, I think at the island of Lundy, where they met initially. And they lived in Alford, in Willoughby, at a house called Pie Wipes. And of course he was down fairly frequently, but his main job was the extramural lecturer and the organiser of evening classes for Nottingham University in Lincolnshire. But he came down to Gibber quite a bit at that time.
Tell me a bit more about your time with the Trust and how your work there started and then developed.
Well, of course, I was still an apprentice electrician but what came along eventually was National Service. That happened in 1958. And I went into the RAF for 4 years to keep my trade, as it were. And when I came out of the RAF, I lived in Skegness and just picked up where I left off at Gibraltar Point. And it was sometime in 1964, Ted approached me and asked if I would like to work for the Trust. And of course I jumped at the idea. And he managed to get some money for a three-year employment. And for that I was to do research on to visitors and why they came and what they did, and build up a picture of our visitors to Gibraltar Point. So that was my first job, really. And the other thing I did in that first year, there was a British Trust Ornithology were running a course and doing a common bird census of the area. That's where normally the common bird census is done over a period of April to June, over 8 visits to farmland. And you record where birds are singing and moving to. And this was the first time it had been done over a week on a site. And they did it to try and get some idea of the bird population of Gib. And it was very successful, but for that they needed a map to find their way about. So I used an old Ordnance Survey map, large scale, and I had to build up a grid, a 200-foot grid on this particular bit of the reserve, and then stick a large white cane on the grid point so they could find their way around when they were recording birds. So I had to teach myself survey work, really, with three large sticks to get a straight line.
And just looking back over 75 years of the Trust, how do you think it's developed over those years?
Well, it's just amazing now when you think of the number of the members, and it's really grown and probably quite influential now. I think initially, I don't know, it was quite low numbers. It was a dozen or so people, perhaps initially. Ted always says it. I think they charged 10 shillings, 50p in the early days. And, well, I suppose 10 shillings was quite a bit then.
And what about the early days of trying to encourage people to take an interest in wildlife and nature? Were people generally curious about visiting places like Gibraltar Point?
Well, I think that was part of my remit, really, when I started doing the surveys and asking why people came, why you come here. And a lot of people just come, they were inquisitive. Often they just used to come for a walk, but quite a lot were amazed that this place called Gibraltar Point existed just 3 miles from Skegness, and you still get that today.
And you've actually been recognised for some of the work that you've been involved with as well. You won the Cadbury Medal a couple of years ago, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. That was really huge surprise.
And what was that in honour of?
I think it just awards my work in conservation, and perhaps in involving people in it, in gaining their interest in nature conservation.
Well, you are still a volunteer now. We're in the grounds of Bannervalham House in Horncastle, the headquarters of the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. What do you do as a volunteer now?
Well, I still go down to Gibraltar Point every day. I'm not quite as active as I used to be, but I do recording there when I visit the bird hides and that sort of thing. And I'm always very keen what's going on with the management and what's happening on the reserve. So I keep my hand in, as it were.
Barrie Wilkinson, what an incredible man, but a very humble man as well, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, that when you chat to Barrie, he always sells himself short. I mean, the guy he's remarkable. I mean, the history that he has with the trust, but also the personal journey is fantastic. But actually, when you look at where we are today, which is 100 nature reserves, 70 members of staff, all the volunteers, that county-wide organisation, there's, people like Ted Smith were kind of front and centre, but Barrie has played a huge part in making that happen, managing the reserve network, managing those teams of staff, actually acquiring the reserves, going out there and purchasing land. He's had such a role in all of that.
And he played down the Cadbury Medal, but that was a key thing. Was it a real prestigious medal to get?
It's a national award. It's given, yearly just to one person who has made a massive difference in the world of nature conservation. And for Barrie to be chosen and for Lincolnshire to be showcased through him and that award was absolutely fantastic. And you ask him about it, it was nothing. It was nothing. It's absolutely massive. It's fantastic.
I love the fact that as a 12-year-old, he turns up, wants to volunteer, and is told to come back again when he's a bit older.
I know. And he sat there and waited 3 years, left school. And the moment he left school, he was straight back down. I'm 15. You told me to wait. Here I am. That shows a real level of commitment and dedication and passion right from that very early age.
Obviously, we're talking about the 75th anniversary of the Trust. And, Barrie is somebody who's been involved nearly all of those years in one form or another. But to celebrate the Trust, there's a special appeal as well, isn't there?
Yes. We decided, with the 75th anniversary, you look back quite rightly, and you look back at the achievements and the journey and all the stuff that we've done. But you also reflect on the scale of what is in front of us, the task that we still have to do. We've lost so much nature from the wider countryside. I think the way I view it, we've won some battles. You managed to secure sites for nature conservation. You can bring certain species back from the brink of extinction, but we're still losing the war. And the scale of what we need to do if we're going to bring wildlife back to Lincolnshire is massive. So we decided that, actually to coincide with that 75th anniversary, we needed a big appeal. It's our most ambitious appeal yet. We're looking to try and raise £1 million over the next 2 years.
£1 million?
£1 million, yes. It's quite daunting for the team here. We're sort of starting at zero and we're looking up a long way towards that £1 million. But that's the sort of thing that we need if we're going to make a difference on all levels of what we do.
So £1 million, is it going towards something specific, or does it generally go in the pot?
So we're looking at 4 key areas that we want to try and tackle by raising this money. The first of which is land. And land is always important. If we can have land and control what happens, we can bring nature back and have direct influence over that. The second is nature. So we need to focus on habitats and species and bring those back from the brink. Then the next one is people, because, I mentioned at the start of the programme, our job is to inspire and educate people to care for wildlife. And then the fourth one, and it's, I think it's becoming increasingly obvious to people, you just look at what's been happening this past year. Climate and climate change is a massive issue. And so that's the fourth of the kind of the areas that we want to focus on.
And if people want to find out more, is there a website set up for this? How can people get involved and donate?
Yep, so the easiest way is to go straight to our website, and that's www.linkstrust.org.uk. On the homepage, you'll see a link to the appeal. It'll tell you all about it, and you can donate through that. But you can ring the office here at Bannervallen. You can send check through the post. There's lots of different ways, and we've already had a big response from members. We kind of launched the appeal with our Lapwings magazine just before Christmas. It's only going to be through the goodwill and the support and the passion and the love for wildlife of the people of Lincolnshire that we're going to get there. So, we need everybody's help.
Fantastic. You mentioned the Christmas word there, and over Christmas, I was watching one of the television programmes featuring King Charles, and he visited Lincolnshire and saw some of our famous natterjack toads.
Yes, I thought it was a nice programme, actually. It really did. It really did showcase the King's passion for nature, and we were delighted that the place that was chosen to really demonstrate that was Lincolnshire, and Lincolnshire's fantastic coastline. One of our staff members, Ruth, she got to show him natterjack toads, and he met some of the Natural England staff down there as well, and it was a fantastic day.
Really looking forward to exploring more of Lincolnshire and the wildlife we have here. I hope you've enjoyed our first Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust podcast. Next month, we'll talk about beavers back in Lincolnshire after 400 years. From myself, Melvin Pryor, and from Matthew, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Wilder Lincolnshire podcast from Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a follow or subscribe from the usual channels, and please tell your friends and family to give us a listen too.